stolen my dreams.
A green hydrogen powerhouse.
Let's talk about climate change.
Yeah, something new and different he's bringing to Radio National. Climate alarmism, I mean, honestly.
How dare you?
This is the last chance.
Yes, this is the Carbon Counter, your news in decarbonisation and climate economics. Tonight, Simon Corbell is here from the Clean Energy Investor Group and former Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for the Environment in the ACT. He was the architect of the Territory's shift to 100% renewable power. G'day, Simon.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
I've been curious to talk to you because obviously there was lots of rhetoric around how much investment was lying offshore, you know, in other jurisdictions, if only Australia would sort of get with the program when it comes to, a pipeline for renewable investments and incentives. What's the mood amongst clean energy investors now that we have a new government?
There's no doubt in my mind from speaking to our members that there's been a very significant shift in sentiment because of the election of the new government, and that's principally because of the headline messages that the new government is sending. We had the elected Prime Minister, the newly elected Prime Minister on election night saying he wants Australia to be a renewable energy superpower. We've had the new Energy Minister focused on a more collaborative approach with the state and territory governments. And for the first time, we've got energy ministers committing to a national transition plan to decarbonise the national electricity market. So all of those very important, albeit headline statements, are sending a signal to investors that Australia wants more investment and wants to accelerate the shift to clean energy. So that's a positive. Obviously, though, events in recent weeks have created, a further ripple of concern about the immediate nature of the market, given the problems we've had in the national electricity market over the past few weeks.
Yeah, so about that, given this sudden crisis, well, some might argue it wasn't very sudden at all, and the regulators stepping in, whether it be AEMO or the ACCC, the chair of which we spoke to earlier here on RN Drive, has that sent a bit of a shiver down the spine of potential investors, getting into a messy market with lots of regulatory hurdles, if you like?
I think the real challenge, I was talking to a number of our CEO members, CEOs of our member companies, I should say, last week, was that at the moment we don't have a wholesale market for electricity where electricity is being sold between different parties, between, for example, retailers and generators in the way that it usually is. And that makes it very difficult to predict longer term what electricity prices are going to look like, because it's not a genuine market. It's a heavily administered market because of the intervention, and I would say necessary intervention by AEMO. So it really is something that needs to hopefully settle down over the next relatively short period. We would certainly be looking for, so that we can return to a much more stable wholesale market, and investors can be thinking about what sort of reasonable prices they can predict over the life of their projects, and therefore what revenues look like, and therefore what the cost of finance and the cost of equity is going to look like. So I think that's the key issue. But to come back to your earlier question, investors are poised to invest considerably in the Australian market. We need to see these issues of detail work through, but the headline messages from the new government stand in marked contrast to that which we heard and which investors heard from the previous government.
Were you and your investor members disappointed to learn today that the Albanese government may include gas and coal when it comes to subsidies to keep the power supply stable?
Well, we certainly see real risks in that approach, and the reason for that is that the experience elsewhere has shown that capacity markets can, first of all, result in payments to generators who aren't actually available when they should be, and that's been a problem in both domestic markets here in Australia, in Western Australia, and in overseas markets where capacity markets exist. But the other bigger problem is that capacity markets, if they're not designed well, result in a slower pace of decarbonisation, because whilst coal will probably be pushed out anyway because of its relative inflexibility. Gas potentially stays in the system longer, and gas does have a significant level of carbon intensity itself. So if we're serious about an accelerated shift towards zero emissions generation in the electricity sector, then we need to be focused on a capacity mechanism or a capacity reserve, which focuses on zero emissions electricity and electricity storage. And that's batteries, pumped hydro, and a range of other technologies such as hydrogen that can meet the needs of the system. And those are the things we should be incentivising through a capacity mechanism or a capacity reserve proposal. So that's what we'll be saying very clearly to the federal government, the states, and to the market bodies.
Simon Corbell is here. We're talking about clean energy investment on RN Drive. And Simon, what about other jurisdictions where there's some interesting initiatives when it comes to stimulating clean energy investment? I know I watch California quite closely. There's some really interesting things happening there when it comes to public and private partnerships. What about and staying in the US, what about these sort of wartime economy powers the Biden administration's using to try and direct manufacturers to build greater capacity in terms of renewable energy? Is that something that, Australia could learn from?
I think it absolutely is. What we've seen in the US is the Biden administration using its wartime powers, as you say, to direct the development of greater domestic supply chain capability in the renewable energy sector, and that's fundamentally about energy independence. We've seen really significant cost escalations around supply of certain renewable energy technologies, wind turbines, solar panels amongst them, and that's been because of supply chain disruptions coming out of China with the lockdown in Shanghai and related issues. So that's added really significant extra cost to new clean energy projects. So in the US, Biden administration using those wartime powers to direct manufacture to focus more on domestic supply chain capability. And I think whilst we can't do it all here in Australia, and we shouldn't try to, there are, I think, key parts of our economy that could be tooled up to deliver that capacity. Mm-hmm. For example, more wind tower manufacture. We're going to need a lot of onshore and offshore wind. It needs to be built domestically, and that would align very well with the Albanese government's commitment to engendering and supporting more local manufacturing here in Australia.
We're going to have to leave it there, Simon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andy.
Simon Corbell from the Clean Energy Investor Group and the former Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for the Environment in the ACT.
Getting in touch with ABCRN is easy. Join the conversation live using the ABC Listen app's call and text features.